Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our regular council meeting of Monday, February the 24th. And I do wish to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the territory of the Sauk Nation. We're here tonight with gratitude. So council, in front of you, you do have tonight's agenda, and I'm looking for a motion for you to adopt this with one amendment, and that is the addition of new business correspondence as item number 12.4, the Sauk Museum Night Market. Move adoption by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions? None? All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Here we have meeting minutes for adoption. The January 30th, 2020 special council meeting, February 18th, 2020 committee of the whole, February 18th, 2020 special council meeting. So I'd like council to move the minutes circulated by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Questions, corrections? Nothing.
No.
Not one.
February 18th, Committee of the Whole. Kudos to whoever did that one, because that is one of the great sets of minutes.
Okay. So there's excellent feedback. You don't have the microphone on,
Oh,
but
that's fine.
okay. So kudos on February the 18th. Excellent. Thank you. All those in favor of adoption? Oh, sorry, Councillor McMath. You're good? Okay. All right, I'll try this again. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And our first item up is item 5.1, the Greater Victoria Green Team. We have Amanda Evans here as a delegation. And Ms. Evans, you have 5 minutes tonight, and we'll get you set up with...
Thank you so much.
If you could just turn on the microphone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me an opportunity to give you an update of what we've been up to. Last year, we partnered with District of Sauk, and we offered activities in your local parks here. So just as a reminder, we are a volunteer group. We coordinate activities across the region, and through hands-on outdoor activities, we inspire people to take care of our environment. We've grown to become the largest environmental volunteer group in the province. Our group here is the largest one in the CRD. And there's benefits, many benefits for partnering with us. Mainly engaging a new demographic that has never volunteered in parks before. So tapping into that younger generation, new families, youth. We're raising awareness of how climate change is impacting us locally and what people can do to participate in addressing. We're providing additional capacity to park staff and stewardship groups and providing media exposure for Sauk. And a lot of what we do is really giving people a sense of belonging, connection to community, feeling connected to each other. Many of our volunteers volunteer because they feel isolated in their communities, and Green Team really gives them that sense of belonging. And we engaged, this was us a couple years ago in Whiff and Spit. A lot of our volunteers are quite young. This is us just last year at Broomhill Park. And a couple years ago, we helped out again at AM Creek. So lots of media exposure. So specifically last year, we organized, gave a presentation about a year and a half ago with the proposal, and thanks to you, we've partnered and organized 2 amazing activities, one at Kaltassin Park. And our outreach really focused on engaging Sauk residents. So these 2, they live down the street from Kaltassin, never volunteered in Sauk before, and through my media, my outreach, they've learned about it, and now they volunteered. So it was awesome to have some local residents. This is a couple quotes of what people experienced after that day. You can read it if you'd like to. It's a part of the reports I do send to you. And we had a really awesome day at Broomhill Park. And it's kind of strenuous area, so our volunteers were carrying loads and loads of Daphne. So really helping out the local Wanda Fuca Community Trail Society, carrying these heavy pieces of garbage and Daphne, and we ended up clearing a huge area of Daphne as well. So lots of people had lots of great things to say. And it's really about connecting with each other. When people really see that, when so many people get together, you can really see the difference in the area you are working in. they're asking me when the next Souk event's going to be. So I've been working with Laura and trying to set some dates for this year. And so this is just a summary of all the impacts we've had in Souk, just to show sort of the in-kind contributions that we're making to Souk, because even at, this is more of a breakdown of where we've come up with that. So even beyond just the cost of each activity, the in-kind is tremendous. And this is what we can measure. So what we can't measure is that it's hard to put a dollar value on the work, but this kind of breaks down what each activity. So in total, we've contributed about $30,000 worth of funding, including in-kind, to Souk over the last couple of years. And this is the breakdown. So I only had 5 minutes, so I wanted to leave a few minutes or 1 minute for questions. And yeah, so this is an way to update and just to talk about moving forward, because I've been meeting with Laura, and we're talking about organizing 3 activities this year, and so we're still interested in making that happen, and how we can kind of move forward together. So if you have any questions, thank you for
Thank you for the presentation and also for sending it ahead of time. So questions, comments, Councillor Bateman? Councillor Bateman, I'm recognizing you first.
Okay,
this
well, that's
time,
very
and
nice of you.
Trying to look more left
Okay.
than
Of course, I
Councillor
hadn't
St.
raised
Pierre.
my hand, but that's fine. I can jump in. So last year we gave you $1,000, I think, is that correct?
It was 3,000.
3,000.
But because of limited parks capacity, we organized 2 and not the 3 that we had talked about.
Okay.
But we're moving forward, we're interested in having 3 per year.
So for those 2 activities, the district contributed
The $1,000 each, which is
$1,000,
half.
okay. So
of the cost.
logically, you'd be seeking $1,500.
What's that?
You'd logically be seeking $1,500 from us.
So this year, it would be, we're moving more towards covering the full cost. So the full cost for us is $2,000. So the proposal of what when I talked to Laura was $1,250 per activity times 3. So it would go from what we agreed on last year for $3,000, and it would increase by $750. We're doing that with all of our municipalities. Some municipalities are actually paying full cost. Some are at 75%. Some of the municipalities or some of our partners have signed up for a 2-year contract too. So depending on, this is a new relationship with Souk, so we are moving slowly to build up on what has worked.
Right.
And so we're moving incrementally each year.
And all 13 municipalities are engaged?
Right now we have 9 on board. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's low capacity, so we have 17 partners between the 2 teams, and so not just municipalities, but we've partnered with the University of Victoria, the Land Conservancy of BC, Nature Conservancy, HAT, and several municipalities here.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's great work, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor St. Pierre.
I was just wondering how you worked, how you were so successful in actually getting younger people to volunteer.
So that is the secret of our program. Our program is an award-winning volunteer program, and there's not just one piece, it's really the whole package. So my outreach, some events, about 10 hours of outreach for one single event. So it ranges from media to putting up posters to emailing schools and church groups to giving presentations to going to community booths. And it's that because our program is about volunteer coordination and volunteer mobilization, we focus on gathering people and we focus on that volunteer experience. So it's not just, it's hard to break down. It's all the work we put in, about almost sometimes 50 hours for one event of work, yeah. So it's not just, it's continuous. We have a solid base of about 3,000 volunteers, including email addresses, but I can't rely on those numbers. It's constant outreach. Yeah, it's a lot of work, surprisingly, to get people out engaged.
Oops. Councillor McMath.
I love what you guys do, and I love
Thank
your
you.
retention. It's impressive. I just had a question. So we gave you $3,000 last year for 3 events,
Yeah.
and you ran 2. What
Yeah.
did you do with the remaining?
I'm not sure, we didn't get that funding.
We didn't even give it to
No,
you.
no, no, no,
Gotcha.
no.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, perhaps what we could do is, I wouldn't mind council to consider a motion that would be something like that council directs staff to report back on a 2020 plan with the Greater Victoria Green Team. And then I'll speak more should that be carried or moved. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. So the intent here then would be for our staff to connect with Ms. Evans and then to determine what would be a good fit for this year, what the project would look like. Would it be 2? Would it be 3? Would we want to consider a service agreement for 2 years and just to investigate that? So it's sort of like to just receive some further information and then we can go from there. Councillor St. Pierre?
I'm just curious if the money would come out of Parks budget or?
That is what the
community grants? Oh, that would be
report
the report, okay.
would come back with that recommendation if it would follow where that would come from. So I don't know. That's why we want to report. Councillor McMath?
Because we made the motion to waive the 2 auxiliary park staff, would it be worthwhile to look at sort of having a project that would, they'd sort of go in tandem with each other? So the work that Parks needs in the peak seasons could be something that ties in with an event that you would have at Broomhill Park?
Perhaps.
How they remove like invasive species and things like that?
Yeah, so that's something that we can have further information on and then see what would work. A big thing is from these events is where then we recognize what sort of species we want, what's native and what we want to actually remove. From the pictures, it looks like I have lots of Daphne in my yard at the moment. Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you so much to you and your team for all of your work that you do, and
Appreciate it.
really appreciate the impact that you've made last year.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so we'll see you again. So next up is item 6.1, Council Strategic Plan, Report of the Chief Administrative Officer. Welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Glad to be back. It was a nice break, but I'm glad to be back in the chair. So the Council Strategic Plan just, again, was adopted by Council on September 30th, 2019. The plan has 3 goals and 18 objectives, and we're diligently working through those 18 objectives. We're trying our best to make sure that we pay close attention to the now and next priorities, but as you'll see on the update that's provided in the agenda package, we really are touching most of those 18 objectives. So I'm just going to touch on a couple today, and we'll be prepared to answer any questions you may have. Happy to announce that depending on what happens with item 10.1 on the agenda today, we may be able to cross off our first objective. 1.1 will be done. So the other one I want to just give you a quick update on is 1.2.2, the Director of Engineering. We are in the final stages of working with a candidate for Director of Operations. So if that comes to fruition, we will have a full slate of directors, and we can start working on the management side and pushing things down. So those are the 2 updates today. We've done as good a job as we can making sure that the status update report is as current as possible. So answer any questions that you might have.
That's great. Thank you very much. Welcome back, and thank you to Ms. Gray for filling in your absence. We really appreciate that. Questions from members of council? Anything? Anyone? Councillor St. Pierre.
Just very quickly, I'm just curious, when is it that we're going to be reviewing the strat plan for the yearly basis?
So right now, I am hopefully going to be sending out a notice to schedule this service level agreement for June 15th is when we're looking for. So at that service level agreement will be the opportunity for council to look at reprioritizing the 18 objectives that are in your plan.
Will that also include looking at the rest of the document and making any sort of refinements we might want to?
Yes, so the strategic plan in general and the action plan that has the 3 goals and 18 objectives.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments? Okay, so look for a motion to receive, please. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any further questions? None. All in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. So next up is our public question and comment period. So this is for all items on tonight's agenda. I don't think there's a specific public input on anything, is there? No, it's straight up. Okay, so any and all items on the agenda, we just require your name, please, and if you could let us know which item you're speaking to, that would be appreciated.
Ellen Lures. I'm speaking to Lot A. I've been wondering how much we've spent on Lot A so far. Our initial expenditure to purchase it was $1,420,000, but to date we spent over $1,641,000 on it. That includes the cleanup, the fence rentals, the interest rates, and now, looking at the geotech report, is reading it, there's be more for the fill and removal of I believe there's hog fuel in there. So how much more are we going to spend? We're like $250,000 that we spent over and above already what we purchased the property for. And now I was looking at this, and to do more work, it means we have to borrow more money. And in the last 3 days, I can't believe it, that I've run into these people older people who said, we can't afford our houses anymore, we can't afford the taxes. And today I ran into a 45-year-old. He says, I can't take it, I can't take it, I can't keep paying these taxes, they just keep going up and up. And I realized that our property, that our taxes are 5 times as high as what they were when we first incorporated. So I think we have to be very diligent in what we're doing, not spending. We have to be more diligent. We have to think things out. And if we don't have the money, we can't borrow it because we, the people, cannot pay it. And I hope the council really considers everything before they make any expenditures, consider what's happening to the population around. It was interesting when I was talking about this over the supper table, my grandson was there, he says, holy smokes, Grandma, that would feed a lot of people that are hungry. Well, yeah, it would. So, but that was his immediate response. But there's a lot of people that are suffering, and I think we have to be very diligent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lures. Other comments on tonight's agenda? So this is your only opportunity to speak in the whole agenda. Only time. Trying to motivate, so.
Good job on CFAX this morning, less than dead. That was good comments, thank you.
Well, thank you for listening. That's good. It was on transit, so I will provide an update on transit when we get to the update section. Yes, but thank you for listening. Okay, that's fine. Okay, anything else? Nope, so we'll move on. So the next item is our consent agenda. So this includes the RCMP Monthly Report and the correspondence block from February the 6th to 19th. So look for a motion to receive, please. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. That's great. Item 9.1 is the Poverty Reduction Planning Grant Application. We have a report here in front of us. And did I skip something? No, I didn't. Okay. I just didn't grab the right report. Anything to add from staff?
Nothing at this time, Your Worship, but if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? So we have a recommendation here that council support a grant application to UBCM's Poverty Reduction Planning and Action Program for up to $25,000 to create a food security strategy that provides actionable items at the local level to reduce poverty, promote community inclusion, and become a more food secure community, and that council directs staff to provide overall grant management. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything else? Councillor St. Pierre.
Just a quick question. I understand, is this the same application that was brought forward by Dinah Gibson from the Social Planning Council? Is this the same? It looks like the same one that Councillor Logans and myself were bringing forward.
Through your worship, the name does sound familiar. I believe that she has been in contact with our senior planner and is interested in working on this with the group.
Wonderful.
Okay, anything else? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. The next is the Lot A Due Diligence Summary. And I will turn this over to staff, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a PowerPoint tonight. I'll just provide a summary of the report. So in May 2019, Council directed staff to undertake the due diligence work for Lot A. As part of that due diligence, a geotechnical study, a preliminary civil design, an archaeological overview assessment, and an environmental assessment were undertaken. Those reports have all now come back and been summarized for you. The geotech study found the proposed development site to be feasible, noting that engineered fill will likely be required to achieve the grade required in some areas, and all refuse and vegetation must be removed prior to construction. The preliminary civil design found that anticipated floor area identified in the Lot A charrette may need to be reduced to between 6,000 and 6,500 square meters from the originally proposed 7,000 square meters due to fire flow calculations. Stormwater management is not an issue, and sewer servicing is available for 150 units. A Class D servicing estimate, which includes a 50% contingency, has been provided and has come in at approximately $3.8 million. We will put that figure in the expression of interest document and ask the proponents to come back to us with ideas on how to fund that servicing. The archaeological overview assessment has found low archaeological potential and recommends no further work be undertaken. And finally, the environmental assessment identified no contamination, previous spills, or environmental concerns. And it was also confirmed that there is no water course running through the property as previously identified by a concerned citizen. And that's all I have.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you very much for this. Questions or comments from council? Councillor St. Pierre?
Just a really quick question. I don't know if you'll have the answer, but the report said that the drainage would have to happen towards Wadham's Way, and I seem to recall topography actually slopes away from Wadham's Way towards Western Foods. So do you have any idea how they're going to deal with building it up, and then are they going to put a retaining wall, or what's that likely to look like? Do you have any clues, or because it sounds kind of odd? A lot of fill, potentially.
Potentially, but bringing the water to the open ditch on Wadham's Way seems like the most appropriate place to bring that stormwater.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I think that in one of the reports, it noted that the sewers or drainage ditches lead over to Dimamill Creek, so they flow that direction. Yeah. Great that this is being done as a prelude to all the necessary, to this expression of interest that is to come to us on March 12th. And I think you're seeking for this due diligence report to be attached to that EOI. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Curious, do we know where the library is at, where their building permit?
Building permit has been approved. The subdivision has been approved. Everything is been forwarded to, all of the approvals have been forwarded to Vero. And I believe the development permit has been approved, and the timing in the lease agreement starts when the DP was approved, so, no. Sorry, I'm gonna ask the corporate officer to chime in.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't think the development permit has been signed yet, but would likely be very close. And we can check with staff tomorrow and provide an update by email to council on that.
Okay, just like to, we sort of heard the first part of this year, so we're coming up on March, so yay. But nice to kind of know when the work is actually going to get
Yeah,
done,
there's
right?
no correspondence or communication back that there's anything that's holding things up at this point, so.
Okay, well, that's good news, though, that all of those things have come and cleared the district. That's excellent. Thank you very much for that. Okay, anything else from anyone, or at this point then, that council accept the A Due Diligence Summary Report for information? Moved by Councillor Lajeunesse, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions on the resolution? None, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried unanimously. Bylaws, item 10.1, we have a council procedure amendment bylaw number 745. And I'll turn this over to our corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as part of the 2019 to 2022 Council Strategic Plan, one of the objectives was to re-examine council and committee of the whole meeting structure, and that is the subject of this bylaw. But at the same time, the provincial government recently provided a draft best practices guide for council procedures bylaw. It's not formally adopted yet, but I had the opportunity to view that draft, so we've actually taken this opportunity with the bylaw amendment coming forward to incorporate some of those best practices, which is what most of the amendments are about. And they're really just, as I said, putting those best practices into place. We're just incorporating a process for notification of canceled or postponed meetings. That's currently not contained within the bylaw. Just changing the wording of the electronic participation to make it clearer. The way it's currently written, it could be a little bit confusing. Identifying the mayor being responsible for taking minutes when all staff are excused from the meeting. There's currently no process for that contained within the procedure bylaw. Incorporating a timeline for the posting of agendas for meetings other than regular meetings. So those would be 2 business days prior to the meeting if it's scheduled, for instance, on a Wednesday or a Thursday, rather than trying to publish it on the Thursday almost a week ahead of time, which can be challenging sometimes. Specifically identifying committee of the whole recommendations to be under the consent agenda. We've been doing that as regular practice, but just formalizing that in the bylaw. And just reversing the agenda order for approval of the agenda and our public hearings, just makes a little more sense logically. And then including issues only contained within the minutes for adoption as a topic for which public input or delegations would not be permitted to speak to. It's come up in the past, and those meetings, whether they're committee of the whole or again come up for actual public input, or there's public input at the meeting at which they're discussed, there really has already been public input, and having public input on topics that are already adopted by the time the public speaks to them really, I don't think, is fruitful. So we're recommending that. We just have defined our appeal process more clearly. We have our development delegation bylaw, and that contains a very clear process. So we have mirrored that process within the council procedure bylaw so that we have consistency across the board for appeals. And then finally was changing the time of committee of the whole meetings from 7 p.m. to 1 p.m., which has been previously discussed by this council. So that's the sum of the amendments for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you very much for the summary. There's just one concern, though, I'd like to raise, and that is with the public being unable to speak to the minutes, because council at any time may pass a motion and debate something that isn't necessarily on the agenda. Like, it could be business arising from the discussion, and then, you know, we try to discourage making motions on the fly, but may pass something that then later a member of the public would say, well, hey, I'd actually like to weigh in on that. So, I mean, I think there's a possibility. It may just be for information, perhaps. So how do we address that?
Through your worship.
I can't really think of an example, but sometimes there's motions made that are like, okay, this wasn't in the report, but then a motion springs up in the discussion.
Would that be something that would be on the agenda as new business, perhaps, during the adoption of the agenda? Like, I think when it's
Maybe.
just in a set of minutes that are attached to your agenda for adoption, all of the consultation, all of the discussion around that issue, the motion's already been made, you're just accepting those minutes. So I can't really think of anything in particular that would happen, but I mean, if it did, I think, you know, it's always up council's prerogative. You could allow somebody to be heard if it was really necessary,
Yeah.
or we could recommend they come forward to a future meeting as a delegation.
So in that case, is it the discretion of the chair to allow that person to speak, or do we require a motion to carry by the council? Because if someone's made the effort to be here, I don't want to say you can't speak to that.
Yeah, I believe it's you would need a council motion, and it's a majority of the council. It's
Okay.
not 2/3 or unanimous.
Okay, just so I
Memory
know going
serves.
forward, because while we do have some members of the public here tonight, we don't always, and then if we have someone waiting through the you know, that does actually attend and raise something, I wouldn't want to discourage that, that's all. Councillor St. Pierre, thank you for that clarity.
On that same point, I mean, a member of the public could simply come forward, and if, for example, Councillor Bateman wasn't available to make sure the minutes were correct, someone might just want to make a correction. And I'd like to be able to hear those people. It might have been someone who actually was there when the minutes were created, and they would like to see a correction happen. So I feel like this is not necessarily useful, or as useful. It hasn't come up very often. I don't think
No.
it takes a lot of our time. And I think that not having this actually gives us a better chance of getting good minutes.
Well, and we have an avenue now to address that, so it's good to know.
So that was one thing.
Yep.
Is there further comments now?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I have a few other comments, mostly having to do with allowing communication and input from the community and from the people who are kind enough to come out on a Monday night and spend time with us. I think we need better marketing, but it's awesome to have you here. Specifically, the 1 o'clock time, obviously is going to restrict certain people. We've talked about that before, but I had a thought that might be interesting to maybe pilot something where we could maybe have people join us remotely. And this would allow, for example, school groups and classrooms to potentially view the proceedings, and then maybe through Skype or some other mode of, digitally be a part of it. I would suggest that if that was to happen, they would have to request it, so we don't just have, a whole pile of people basically, cluttering the proceedings and essentially playing the troll card, not actually spending a whole lot of energy, but then, the input might be wonderful anyway, but I suggest we probably want something like that. But I do think it would allow us to actually reach out to the younger voices in our community that we don't generally have access to. So in terms of the 1 o'clock, that just made me think, if it's 1 o'clock, someone could actually, get on their phone, get on their device, and actually participate if they wish to. The other thing, and I don't know if this is the right time, but I'm worried that it might be, is that I strongly feel that our correspondence system at this point in time is not better than the one we had when we started. It actually prevents people in the community from realizing that their correspondence has been received, that it has been considered. If they actually come down, if it's part of the agenda, they can actually speak to it. But if someone on council hasn't championed it and have it included in the agenda, then that's it. It's gone down a black hole. And I think that in terms of our wish to build a reputable organization, have better communication, that we should include the correspondence in some way in the agenda so that that problem could be avoided. And I don't know if this is the place to do it or not, but I was looking through all the information and correspondence was not included, so I don't know if this is the right place. But
So just a couple of questions back, or comments back. So first, between the 1 and the 7 o'clock, our challenge when it's been 7 and later is that a lot of younger people have to leave because it gets too late. So sometimes when we have had delegations from young people, we try to move them up forward in the agenda, but it's still a bit late for a 7 start. They do, because it's comment, anyone can email us and have their views provided in the materials which we've received. But in terms of correspondence, like, we do have the whole list on the consent agenda. Like, all the correspondence that we received, and it's all put in here fully, as I understand it. Nothing is taken away. It's all here. And then if you wanted to extract something, you would do that when we adopt the consent agenda. So this is exactly like it was what's been the change? Isn't it all here?
No, just the listing of all of the items are there, so it's still
Okay.
there. So the process that we were working towards was if council before today identifies something to be pulled, that you can contact us through the corp@suc.ca email to
Right.
do that. And then we will put it on the agenda. We can do that as a supplementary if necessary, if it's something that you'd like discussed immediately, or it can go on the next meeting if it's not time sensitive. And then the other piece of that was that we are working on our correspondence procedure. I think you'll notice that there's been a lot of red notes on a lot of the correspondence that you're receiving. So I'm reviewing that before it gets sent out to council and identifying what internal actions have been taken on it so that you know what's happening with that. And our next piece is working on getting back to all of the writers to let them know what is happening with their issue.
Okay, but that's all the correspondence that's coming in to you is happening that way?
Yep.
So that's an improvement than just sitting in a reader file?
Yep, correct. It all goes out to council, and it all gets put on the agenda under the consent.
Yeah, okay. Councillor McMath?
Yeah, we used to do like every single letter or email or contact was in the package, in massive packages, but then we ended up just like commenting on every single piece, I think, to have that feeling like of acknowledgement for that person. But every letter, the title of that letter goes into it, and then if you want to pull it, like we see all of the contact that comes in, so we get the opportunity to review it, read it, and if we wish, then we can pull it. Yeah.
Well, and as staff has said, they're also following up with all the correspondence as well. But go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
I think this is one of those places where local government actually has generally a lower threshold for people to participate and have input. And I think this is not something that we should be necessarily giving up easily. When people actually write a letter, they're making an effort. They're making a large effort to reach out to us. And I think that having it included in its total, not just a listing of, so-and-so sent this piece of information, but having the total letter in the agenda allows us the option of addressing it or having someone in the public address it. And that actually makes us much more accountable and allows us to be influenced, by the public. I think that I love efficiency to bits, but I think this is not a place for efficiency. I think this is a place where we need to have those letters as a part of the agenda.
Okay, so out of the 18 items on the consent agenda, though, only 3, 4, 5 are from residents? Like, some of it is just news medias. Like, it's not, like the Premier's Awards for Education, like, do we now have to just write back to Minister Fleming? Like, I don't think so. It's just here for information. Like I don't get why all of this would have to be printed. That's pages and pages and pages. Councillor Bateman?
Of course, I'm the only one getting a actual print agenda, so I think there's not all that many pages. So just, this was my one and only notice of motion in my 15 months here related to this correspondence policy. Because when we began, for the first 6 months, we had the entire package. And then we had nothing. And then I found this example in Qualicum for at least a listing and the ability of everyone to request if they so wish. And I guess it's up to us to really, I know I've been lax in this. I don't analyze the correspondence package as deeply or as, when we receive it once a week, right? Sent in to us. And I haven't been pulling items, because I think Fair Free Transit might have been a good one for tonight, or Karen Mason's letter to the Soup News Mirror.
It's a letter to the Mirror, not to us.
Well, it isn't, but it is something of a matter for discussion, potentially. Steps to the Future Child Care Society, for example. My question through you to Ms., our corporate officer. I won't try pronouncing it tonight. Oh, man. Is if a member of the public sees an item on this consent agenda with correspondence, they could address that, could they?
Yes, they certainly could, and we actually had a member of the public inquire about one of the pieces that was on the agenda tonight. So we kind of half anticipated them being here, but they're not, but they would certainly have the ability to speak to it.
So on other subjects, it needs to go to 1 o'clock. This is common practice in many municipalities. You know, we're being, as Mrs. Lewis says, we've got to watch our nickels and dimes. And Mr. Offley says that as well, watch your nickels and dimes. So, but keeping overtime expenses to a bare minimum is useful in that context. Of course, it's difficult for Councillor McMath and Councillor Logans to cite two working people who are...
Councillor Logans is unable to attend tonight because she has school. So if it was during the day, she'd be available.
Okay.
So I
there's
don't, I
an-
think we just watch the, right?
Yeah, it's complicated. And I guess finally, I'll say, good to close that loophole for issues only contained within the minutes. Back in 2016, when I was sitting in those cheap seats, I thought that would be the opportunity to bring up any number of issues, and I was shut down the first time I attempted to raise a matter that was in the minutes by the CAO of the day. So good to get some clarity. And I think only, in my recollection, only one individual has attempted to address a matter that was in the minutes of a previous meeting. So good work.
Councillor McMath?
But your point about the 1 o'clock being inconvenient for people or trying to reach out digitally, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we would be like overcome by unconstructive feedback. And if I can make it here, then other people can make it here. And if they're physically unable to make it, then they, like the mayor said, they have the opportunity to email any issue that they have. Going back to the correspondence, you say that being inefficient leads to a lower quality of work, and I totally disagree with that. And I like a little bit take offense to it, where it's like, I read every single piece of correspondence that we get in the package, and not once have I ever felt the need to bring it forward, and if I did, I would. But if you recall, we would spend like an excessive amount of overtime hours talking about stuff in letters, and it would just be for discussion, which is not efficient, and it doesn't do anyone any favors. Like that doesn't make us more committed or more transparent. That's just, in my opinion, was a waste of time for everybody. So I read every single piece of correspondence that comes in. I'm sure almost every person does. If we need to pull it, we can pull it. I don't think putting it in the minutes is making us any better at our jobs.
So there's still a correspondence policy that's kind of in the works, right? Because my challenge that I have is that correspondence once upon a time just came in the mail in a letter. So now we have emails that come just to me, but they're addressed to all of council, so I have to remember to forward it to info. Then emails go straight to info. Then I get messages through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, through LinkedIn. Like, there's so many different ways, and I have to say, you need to put this into an email and send it in this way. Like, it just, and then it still comes in the mail and it's dropped off, and there's all these ways. So sometimes it's like, wow, there's a lot coming in, and what is the most productive way to put it forward? So that's where I try to just send it all either to corp or to info, but then sometimes, you know, I didn't send every... Well, the matter related to fare free transit goes to the Transit Commission, so I didn't send you the 1,000 emails that I received, which is probably, because anytime I send council, I get another one back to myself again. So it starts to get a bit unwieldy in that case, and that wasn't a matter for this table. But just going forward, it does help to sort of streamline what works. I think for me, this is working. But I see the block email come in, and sometimes it's the second or third time that I've received that one email because of how it comes in, right? So I think it's the case for now. The system seems to work. I think it is upon you to bring stuff forward or to follow up with staff to see if a service request or those sorts of matters have taken place. And I see that staff are now circling back. That was the one piece we wanted, was circling back. So anyway, Councillor, look for other ideas, but I also think that opening up sort of a portal, I would like to see what that would look like, to an unknown entity, and who is on the other end of Facebook or Twitter or whatever for providing feedback, and how would we verify that that is an actual person on the other end? And in our community, I'm not sure. Councillor McMath.
I had a question through your worship to staff. We had Karen Mason come in and present on behalf of the chamber, and there was some confusion about a package that she dropped off. So she dropped it off at the front desk, and we didn't get it at the time of our meeting, and then we got it later at another meeting. Can you explain how we can sort of prevent like that misunderstanding or miscommunication in the future, and to simplify it for someone who maybe it's like their first time dropping off?
Through the chair to Councillor McMath, unfortunately, the document did not reference the meeting. It was only addressed to mayor and council. And we do have some new staff at the front desk, so we have refreshed the process with them to make sure, and I get a copy of all the correspondence that comes in immediately so that we can funnel it to the appropriate way. But we did get the information for council at that meeting. We were, I don't remember if you were here, but we were able to.
You went down and like made copies and brought
to
it up.
find it, but unfortunately
Yeah.
she didn't tell the staff member that it was for the meeting, nor was the meeting identified on the correspondence. So it was just an unfortunate set of circumstances, but we've taken steps to address that moving forward.
Great, thank you.
Okay, anything else? So at this point, there is a recommendation that council give first, second, and third reading to the council procedure amendment bylaw number 745-728-01, 2019. Moved by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor Bateman. So we have now, we have adopted a procedural bylaw. We're now amending it. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is there is opportunities to amend this procedural bylaw time and time again when we have better avenues of best practice that we want to refresh. So I don't want you to feel discouraged if this isn't working. Let's just try to continually work to find ways to improve upon it. Okay? Questions, comments? Anything? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next up is the Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw here in front of us. Over to Ms. Gray, please.
Through your worship, not a big extensive report here. This is just a standard bylaw that we need to adopt on an annual basis. It's a requirement of our banking institution, CIBC, on the off chance that we may need to do some unexpected borrowing. So it basically authorizes a line of credit up to the maximum set in the bylaw should a situation ever occur where we would need to borrow funds in an emergency situation. As stated in the report, we haven't had to use this in the past and don't anticipate using it currently in this year. It's just a formality that we just need to have this bylaw adopted by council. So just requesting for second, third reading of the bylaw. If approved, then it'll come back for adoption.
Councillor St. Pierre? Okay, so Councillor St. Pierre is moving that council give first, second, and third reading to the Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 777-2020. Seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 11 is our new business. I sort of just put that into 12.4. So we'll just do the municipal EV infrastructure correspondence. So here's an item here that has been removed for discussion. So it's kind of a list here. Councillor St. Pierre.
I'm wondering if we can recommend examining and adopting the Saanich model as opposed to simply accepting this for information.
What is the Saanich model?
So within the document, they look at different municipalities, different tiers in terms of where they're at in terms of EV infrastructure. And Saanich seems to be leading the way in terms of having some good bylaws that should probably be adopted everywhere, just in terms of the direction that we're going with EV infrastructure by 2030 and so on and so forth. I was just going to suggest that however it might fit into staff's work on this type of bylaw, if we could examine this, specifically Saanich's model and see what we can do to adopt it Souk-sized.
Okay, so in this case, what you would want to do is, we would want to request a report on this.
Okay, then.
Right, so that we have more information on that.
This just feeds from this. This wouldn't be a new business.
No, you can, it's sort of like a motion arising, right? So
Okay.
perhaps it would be that council directs staff to report back on what a district of Saanich or a district of Saanich model sized for Souk would look like.
Yeah.
I'm creating this as I go. I don't know if that was the best language, so. City of Saanich. It's District of Saanich, according to our, so no, district.
Not yet.
No. So is that what you're moving, Councillor St. Pierre?
Yes.
Okay, so that's moved. Is there a seconder? I'm not seeing a second. Oh, you're seconding that. Okay, so anything to add? No? Councillor Bateman?
Seconder gets first shot.
Yeah. So, oh, Councillor Lajeunesse, you're the seconder. Would you like to motivate? Okay, it's fine. Councillor Bateman?
Okay, well, I agree that this is, we need to reach a best practice level. Saanich worked with the BC Sustainable Energy Association on its Renewable by 2050 campaign. That was a few years back. So yeah, they've probably undoubtedly come up with a best practice. I think we will have a new zoning bylaw emerge out of the new OCP. So my suggestion would be that we stay, as the mayor suggests, focused on the OCP this coming year and a half, likely, or 2, year and a half. Year, okay, 1 year, and once we complete that, make sure we flag this as essential in our new zoning bylaw. Because naturally, with 25% of all new vehicles sold by 2025 are to be EVs, and 100% by 2040 is the projection. So we need to get this infrastructure standard in all new construction. So I'd recommend that we hold off on that, not send another staff report into the system, and be sure we flag it for adoption.
Through the zoning bylaw process. Okay, Councillor McMath?
I echo Councillor Bateman.
Okay. Councillor St. Pierre?
I have concerns simply because for every building that we put up and anything that goes up in the next couple of years, which is the soonest we'd be able to make these changes, these are buildings and places that won't have the appropriate infrastructure, and then the costs go way up to put up that EV infrastructure. It's just much more expensive to retrofit. So we're not doing anyone any favors, really.
But now, like at our last council meeting, the staff brought forward the building bylaw that is going through a review process. So that would be a good that is actually, I think, the
That's where this
best
could feed
way
into.
for this to fit. So perhaps an amendment to that would be that rather than staff report back, is that council request staff to raise this as a discussion item in that public engagement or that outreach with the building community.
In the workshop.
And
Through the workshops and the consultation there.
Absolutely.
And then there would be the opportunity to look at what sort of, as you know, someone's building a home, what sort of grant opportunities, like all of that would be embedded into one as it goes forward. And that may be a good way to incent home buying of a certain type. So that's probably a good place for
That
it.
makes a lot of sense.
I didn't get an amendment for that. I just started rambling on. So I apologize. Can I have an amendment for that motion? But we actually need to see the motion. To include a discussion of EV charging infrastructures. Yep, in the building bylaw review.
Can I propose a?
Yeah, that would be
motion?
lovely. Thank you. You guys have written down already. It's actually it's the building bylaw review, not the zoning bylaw review.
This one is the zoning that's in the correspondence.
So we acknowledge that, but we're actually more focused on the building bylaw review, because when that was introduced to us at the last meeting, this is where staff had outlined the step code and what that would look like, and so that would be the appropriate place to raise it, would be through that discussion, rather than the zoning bylaw. Because this is the one that's happening now, so as those conversations reach out, it would kind of tie in together.
And through your worship, the building bylaw isn't where we're going to identify EV infrastructure, though, if that's.
But if you're building a house, though, and if you have to meet step code, wouldn't that,
Okay,
I'm not an expert on step code, but here we have the step code being advanced potentially
Okay,
to
fair
meet
enough.
certain targets. So if part of that, if the building community was in agreeance, then it only would tie in that you would have accommodation for a bike rack and a charging facility, wouldn't it? Like, it seems to fit. Yeah?
Yeah, if I could, I think possibly the Saanich model is a little bit older, but
Yeah.
the whole review of building code and step code, I think it's probably a better fit with the building bylaw than it is with the zoning bylaw. But it will be
Yeah.
good to get some feedback from the building community, because all of these things, you know, every extra dollar that we put on development has an impact on building. So it'd be good to get some of that feedback through this
would.
public engagement on the building bylaw. So I certainly think we can make that work.
Okay, good. All right, so this, Councillor McMath?
It's still not quite correct. So we're not directing staff to review and examine it. We're just asking that it be incorporated into the discussion.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so, and then you just needed that council directs staff to include the District of Saanich. There we go. Model. Okay, so everyone's clear. That council directs staff to include the District of Saanich zoning bylaw model as it relates to EV infrastructure for discussion during the building bylaw public engagement process. So that's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Nope. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right. So the next one is kind of exciting. Girl Guides of Canada are having their big event here at Camp Bernard this summer. So much like the Scouts Jamboree that happened in our community last year and occurs every 4 years, now it's the Girl Guides' turn. So we're expecting up to 4,000 guides and leaders to be in the community this summer. So part of their outreach to us has been to do some work in our community. Guides will always do community cleanup. They'll be doing those sorts of events. But some of the conversation is, what kind of a legacy project could they take on? And one thing that I get a lot of interesting queries about is the sea-can on Whiff and Spit. So apparently, according to one visitor, they were told that the sea-can stores light bulbs for the lighthouse. And why do we need such a large container of light bulbs? And thought that, I guess the urban legend or the Whiff and Spit legend is that the lights are being phased out, so we had bought as many incandescent light bulbs as possible and put them in the sea-can. And I've heard that a few times. So someone, I think, is just having a walk and it's just, oh yeah, it's full of light bulbs. It's not. It's full of spill response equipment that is used by our emergency support team should there be a spill of the like in the harbor. So that's why the can is there. So one conversation would be that the Girl Guides, when they were here, could actually do a mural on part or all of it. So they have the capacity to do this, and in this way, it would be a legacy. It would beautify it because it's rather ugly. Like, it's not an attractive feature, but it needs to be there. And buying an attractive feature to sit there to steal necessary equipment doesn't make a lot of sense. So in this way, they have come to us just with a quote of, it's about $1,000 for the materials, and the Girl Guides would do the work in the mural. And so I thought that this might be, this would be a program, we could access the SUIT Program of the Arts funds for it. And to do this, and there's an estimate, and this is for one side only. So the other thought, obviously, it's the same on the other side, and if you wanted to do the whole thing, it would be about $2,500, say $3,000 to do the whole can. And it wouldn't be a tax implication, it would be the Program of the Arts funds. And I'm now starting to get some queries of other places, like the Telus mural that had been talked about and sort of didn't happen. So there's sort of a sentiment of getting murals up in our town, and I think that would be a neat project for the Spit. It would keep in the theme of the Spit and the like, and for the Girl Guides that might come back and visit, it may be the case of, hey, look at that, I painted that, and it would actually add a nice element to the end. So this is here for your review, acceptance, or perhaps we could direct staff for further information on it. Councillor St. Pierre? Okay, so we don't want to just receive it for information, so doing something. Yeah, so perhaps then, Ms. Machado?
I have been involved in some brief discussions on this issue, and I think that there was perhaps some suggestion that the spa reserve funds actually be used for a honorarium or to put out a call for artists to have them actually design something and paint the image on the can that the girls could then fill in to ensure that it's, attractive. I don't know what's going to happen if you just turn 50 girls loose with a paintbrush.
Gets magical.
So perhaps considering that in your motion to either have staff report back on what staff involvement would be required to move this process forward.
Okay, so then maybe we can consider that council directs staff to report back on a spa mural project with the Girl Guides on the sea can at Whiff and Spit. And then the can itself would need to be primed, and then I was thinking then maybe a paint by numbers type of. So we would need to move on this pretty quick to get that going. Okay, so the council directs staff to report back on a spa mural project on Whiff and Spit with the Girl Guides for the summer of 2020. Do we have someone to move that? Moved by Councillor St. Pierre. Oh, thank you, Councillor. Seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Councillor McMath.
I just, for clarity for myself, is this direction so that SPA creates their vision for the mural and draws it, or that they work with the Girl Guides to design something together?
I'm just sort of reference because that committee is not really active. Mm-hmm. It would be like a SPA project, meaning that's the funding source. SPA funded project.
Okay, because I just would hate it if I was a Girl Guide and I had to color by numbers if I wasn't involved in the process. It would take a lot of the fun out of it. And I hear what our corporate officer is saying, because who knows? But at the same time, it's also that's half the fun, and it is half the magic of it too. And the other piece, this last one before I forget it, is this motion to also discuss potentially all four sides or just the one?
I think just, we'll get that in the report. Okay. It'll maybe break it down. The other thought is that this will also enable our staff to connect with Girl Guides. They might have, I've seen Girl Guides at Women Deliver last year. There was a massive conference in Vancouver, and they had it was interesting, they had somebody create just the outlines of things, and then individuals would go in and paint And it was beautiful imagery that was created out of this. So it just provided some structure to start, and then people colored in and made beautiful images. But I think we would want something that kept in the spirit of Women's Pit. That would sort of fit, right? A cityscape.
Through your worship, some new information just came to light. Our fire chief has just advised that the West Coast Marine something or other is actually planning to replace that sea can.
Oh,
Oh,
when? With another sea can.
Your worship, over a year ago, I was out there with the West Coast Marine Response Corporation, that's the South Coast Oil Response, and we ended up going in that sea container, taking a look at the status of the boom. And that boom is in pretty rough shape, and they had full intentions this over a year ago to have a new container with some sort of harpoon mechanism to support the proper deployment of the boom. I haven't heard from them in over a year, but part of this process will trigger me to follow up with them and see what their status of, what their intentions were with that container.
Well, isn't that, I thought it was our container.
I'll find
is
that out for
ours.
you, Worship. That
Yeah.
corporation was interested in replacing the equipment there so they have better coverage as far as dealing with an oil spill into the actual harbor.
Okay, so well, I guess it's good that we're reporting back and not just painting it. So if they're but either way, if they're replacing the container with a brand-new container, it's still an ugly container. It's just a matter of when, because I don't want to lose, you know what I mean, right? So what would be helpful then is if we find out that September is when they're replacing the container, that perhaps could staff come back with another option for the Girl Guides? I just think it's an opportunity to have a beautification project occur that involves a lot of youth in the community. So maybe we'll add an amendment then, utilizing the SPA funds, hold on here, on a mural project. Or if I'm going to propose an amendment that would say, report back on a mural project on Whiff and Spit container or other, or alternatives. Do I have a seconder for that? Or alternatives by Councillor St. Pierre with the Girl Guides for the summer, now that we know that information, because that would be a shame to have them do this amazing work and then it disappears and an ugly, ugly container comes back. That's right. So we'll go with that then. Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor McMath?
Do you need a motion for Chief to follow up on?
That'll be part of the
timeline?
staff reporting back. Yeah, that'll encompass all of that. Anything else? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And 12.3. We have the Otter Point Shoulder Widening Update correspondence here for information. So this is here for your information. Councillor McMath and Councillor St. Pierre.
I was going to move to receive.
Oh, move receipt and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Okay, anything to add, Councillor and Councillor St. Pierre?
This is strictly for information. I don't think we're being asked by the Ministry of Transportation for any input at this point in time.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Your worship, this piece of information came in a little late last week, so the correspondence piece of the agenda was already done up. But because under the project status, they will be doing pre-clearing work in February and March, and they may even be out there this week. So I just wanted to make sure that council and the public knew what was going on out on Otter Point Road. We're going to be, over the next couple of years, there's going to be lots of this with the Otter Point French Road widening happening, and of course the four laning on Highway 14. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McInnes. Okay, all those in favor of receipt? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. So 12.4 is a new business item that was received from the Souk Museum and Night Market. In here, they are looking, as you can see, to facilitate special event permitting from the BC Liquor Branch, and they were looking for support from council as recognizing the summer night market as municipally significant. And they have a proposed They have some items here on the wording. So any questions? Councillor St. Pierre?
Instead of receiving it for information, can we actually set some sort of
Yeah.
official correspondence? Can we just move to the finish line on this one? And
Yeah, that's what we would want to do. So that council, I think the discussion piece is, do we as a council recognize this as a municipally significant event?
yes.
So I certainly feel it, and I could see everyone else agrees with that. So that council endorsed the Souk Museum Night Market as a municipally significant event, and we support their application and event. And
Direct staff to produce a letter. Do they get the letter as well?
the application.
They only need one.
Okay.
Councillor McMath?
So in order for them to be deemed municipally significant for their application, they can either have a municipal resolution or a letter. So through this, we won't have to write a letter.
Perfect.
Yep, so we would still provide this back. We still need to provide correspondence back to Mr. Boyko at the museum, so. Okay, so do we have a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Bateman that council endorse the Souk Museum Night Market as a municipally significant event and support their application, and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any discussion? We just wish them success as another excellent summertime. Looking forward to it. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. So will staff circle back to Mr. Boyko? Perfect, thank you. Council reports. Councillor St. Pierre.
I was at the CRD Water Commission this last week, and Director Hicks made arrangements so that if we have heavy rains again and the spillways basically overflowing, that we're actually informed or appropriate coordination happens so that we can hopefully avoid any future tragedies like the one we had. In addition, I attended the One Planet workshop sponsored by SIP, the District of Saanich Van City, and the One Planet Network. Very interesting. The network offers guidance, training, and tools for individuals, community groups, including communities of faith, and local governments to develop individual climate action plans, but also shares all the ideas and solutions in the database, aggregates all the effects so that people can actually realize or get an idea of how much impact they're actually having in terms of carbon reductions and so on and so forth. So you can actually, get solid information in terms of what's actually happening, get ideas, and so on and so forth. I've only scratched the surface. It looks like an excellent program, and I'm hoping to work with it.
Councillor Bateman?
Okay. So as Deputy Mayor in your absence, I attended the first of the renewed Memorandum of Understanding meetings with the Sauk Nation, and that was last week with our CAO and Jen over there. And it was a very promising and exciting in-camera conversation about which we can't say anything. I also attended the Awareness Film Night screening of The Pollinators, and this featured talks by Tudwell Creek's Bob Liptrot and our PhD scientist Pavy Abernathy from Souk, and it's definitely not a happy picture for our bees and the ecosystem at large. What was that? Well, that was a pen. And so just a quick heads up that I will likely be bringing a notice of motion regarding a cosmetic pesticide bylaw for consideration by council in the next little while. And I know while it is not related to the OCP directly, it is related to the number one issue. Anyway, I'll motivate when I bring that motion. A meeting of the EMCS Society last week, and they were very thrilled with the provisional approval of $25,000 for the theater fund campaign, theater seating. The Economic Development Group met for the first time in 2020 last week out at the 17 Mile House, and discussion of the hotel tax, revitalization of CERTA, Highway 14 corridor construction, and the extension of water to North Souk were on the agenda. And I also attended the annual general meeting of the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. Councillor Cynthia Day from Colwood was reappointed as chairperson for perhaps the 15th year running, I think it is now. And interestingly, the guest speaker, we always have a guest speaker, he was from the Victoria's Threshold Housing Society, and it's the leading housing provider for youth at risk, aged 16 to 24 in the Capital District. And that's not a claim to fame because there's an awful lot of need out there for young people. 35% of youth leaving foster care are homeless immediately. 41% of today's total homeless population first became homeless at age 18. So there is a real need at this vulnerable and critical age to get some housing in place. The sad thing is that there were 132 applications last year for this Threshold Housing Society. They had room for 22. So those 110 other kids were falling between the cracks. And yeah, so as ever with the family court, I keep learning some sobering realities about what's happening to a fortunately very small percentage, but still a very significant cohort. And I think, and coldest night of the year, which I'll leave for you, Mayor Tate.
Councillor Lajeunesse?
Not much to report other than the LGLA conference, which some of us attended together, and I found that very useful and learned a lot. Attended the Wounded Warriors Run, the kickoff from Souk to Sydney, and the celebration of life for the 3 young lads that we lost in the river. And that's about it.
Councillor McMath?
I just had one item to chat about, which was on February 19th, we had a pretty tremendous traffic delay right around the community time. So I called and spoke with the Ministry of Transportation, I think 6 times in total, and communicated that frustration. And so just to update everybody on how it should run, what went wrong, and what they're doing now. So they try to avoid single lane alternating traffic, but it's in some parts with the construction and the widening, the 4 lanes, it's unavoidable. However, anytime someone does work on a provincial highway, they have to take out a permit with the ministry. And there are restrictions to each of those permits. So on that day, there was a permit taken out, and the ministry didn't communicate that, which they've checked. And from this point going forward, we will get a notification from them that that's happening. And then, although the group took out the permit, they didn't stick to it. So the time limitation is 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and it's not to exceed a 10-minute time frame of delay. That was not followed, clearly. They stayed well past that, and the delays were well beyond that. And the challenging part, which I communicated very strongly, was that those what they see as tiny delays have huge ramifications. So it took me 2 hours, let's say thousands of people who are commuting, 70% of our residents, 2 hours to get home. So it's 10,000 hours of family and personal time lost because of a poor choice. So I communicated that very strongly. They listened, they heard, and so they are going back to discussion about having a smaller allowable window, so shortening it from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They're also going to be more frequently updating their Drive BC through their Twitter account and their website. They're also going to be monitoring the work in that section in particular much more closely. And there's also going to be the installation of they're motion time sensors. So even if that contractor isn't communicating that to MOTI, the sensors will pick that up. So there's these chains that are coming through to sort of prevent that gap in communication. So we'll get the heads up from MOTI beforehand, which we can share with the public so that they can make arrangements beforehand. Smaller windows we'll look at, and we're looking to have a meeting in the next week or 2 here just to connect on getting a timeline and a schedule from them as well.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor McMath. So just some updates for myself. Tomorrow, transit the Transit Commission will be reviewing the transit plan for Souk. So, which is really exciting. So I've had an opportunity to look at the draft. I think their staff has done excellent work in terms of understanding the needs of our community. They are proposing to actually have 4 loops come into Souk. So right now we have 2 big one-way loops. So the bus starts in Langford and then it comes through and it circles out during weekdays only, or it runs like East Souk through Sun River and down. And they run 3 times a day and in one direction. So the intent is to move people within Souk, which is great, and to line them up with the 61 to take commuters out of Souk. They sort of have put in their short-term, and because of the, like some of them are critical fixes, like we need 4 additional buses, 2 double-deckers now, so in each direction, because there's overloading that's happening. So there's the critical fix, and then there's the short-term in terms of how they're addressing all of this, and then all of their medium-term and long-term. But a lot of it falls all into like the short-term because of the needs of our community. So these are sort of some highlights here. They do reference the Wadham's Way as an exchange. So what an exchange means, it's basically what you see in front of Village Foods. It's so that 2 buses can pull in at one stop. So a smaller bus would pull in and then the double-decker. So then obviously people need to get off one and connect to the other, and then it would leave. So they're moving in the right direction. They're also looking at another intent would be where could they acquire land for a yard here? Because a lot of drivers live in Souk. So the drivers have to drive into town and then deadhead a bus to Souk and then drive out again. Whereas if they actually were able to have, and then when you hear about electrifying the fleet, it's too long a distance. We don't have charging infrastructure here, but if they actually progressed work on a yard, we could actually potentially look at that when the technology becomes available. But it just seems interesting to have people, like how frustrating must that be to do? I've never, okay, that makes complete sense, right? To have to do that. So there's some real opportunities here. My concern was with, I referenced the 1,000 emails on free fares for youth, is sort of an initiative that Victoria wants to see expanded across the region, pretty much effective immediately. When we've discussed this before, like I think it's a great idea, but our youth do not have service. In the weeknights, when do they need service is after school and on weekends. Our bus runs every hour on Saturday and every hour and a half on Sunday. The commuter buses don't run at all in the, like they'd have to leave school early to catch one of those little commuting buses home. Whereas the school bus will take you right there. And parents already subsidize the whole cost of school buses. So in some ways, it's an urban problem trying to fix something rural. My challenge with supporting that motion is I don't want our service expansion to be pushed down the line. We've been waiting a long time for the service plan to come for Souk and for the service to expand out here. We have the highest amount of ridership in the region. 20% of our commuters use transit. Second to us is Esquimalt. And the other piece that I would like to see answered here is how can transit connect to get our residents to Victoria General or and then to UVic and also to CFB Esquimalt? Because right now, even if someone took the earliest bus, they can't get to work at either place on time. In both cases, you have to arrive early to get on a shift. So we have a large number of people that are driving to both locations. And so in the case of VGH, it may be a discussion on how does it work with the shift nurses and all the workers that are on shift rotation of some sort. Could that work? And then I was talking to someone, they said, well, they can get off at Helmeken. I'm like, yeah, okay, you can get off at the Helmeken overpass. And then you have to walk. It's still quite a distance to walk there to just when you're starting a 12-hour shift and then to walk all the way back. It's a bit of a trek. So there needs to be a way to get people there, and also just for maybe patients who need to have access. It's expensive to park at the hospital, and you have to keep running in and out all the time if you're waiting there, and then potentially on to Royal Jubilee. And then also the other one is to CFB Esquimalt, because that's where people cannot make that a connection to get there on time. So a lot of that is more, this part happens and then all the connections work, but it just wasn't really answered in the plan because the plan focuses more on Souk specifically. So I just sort of got this, but it's something I can share out. It's just I'd rather wait till it's approved or has some traction with the commission before it moves from there. So this is where, you know, when I was asked, as a member of the public heard me on the radio, if we were to advance free fares as of September, then what routes in the core would be canceled to meet our emerging needs in Souk? Because the two cannot happen at the same time. Buses take 18 months. So if we initiate a service plan change now, it's 18 months for it to come in effect. So that's all fine, but then what? How would the buses change and move to fill our growing needs here? So that's one thing that's coming up. In addition to that, I was in the provincial budget, so I'm still waiting to find out how the impacts are to Souk. I know that we had some capital plans for our schools, so we'll be looking forward to hearing from the school board what that looks like and what they'll be advancing out our way. I was also doing advocacy days on behalf of the UBCM, so there were 3 asks. One of them was on improving local government engagement. So as the province moves forward with the UN Declaration or any matter impacting land use in a community, that were consulted early and often as they progress their plans. And in other parts of the province, there's been some issues, caribou recovery and the like, because local governments were not involved in the process. But when, as you know, we are all on the ground in the community. So if something needs to unfold, if the province reaches out to us, we can, here's stakeholders, here's people you can connect with, consult with us early, consult with us often. The other one was on local government finance. As part of UBCM, I have struck a special committee to revitalize fiscal futures. This was a document that was done in 2013, and it's how local governments generate revenue. So we've done a brief review of that report, and now the scope is narrowing specifically down into community safety, affordable housing, and climate action. So basically, we don't want to be downloaded upon anymore. So as there's changes that happen from other orders of government, what is the funding mechanism that goes with it? An example of it would be cannabis revenue sharing. So we have done our part as a local government with cannabis legalization. Where's our 25%? There was a 25% commitment of the tax from the federal government that was meant to flow through to local governments. We don't have our share. So the province is receiving 50%. They received an additional 25%, 75%. That 25 was to flow through directly to local government. It's flowing through in Ontario. It's flowing through in Quebec. We want our 25%. This is new revenue. We're entitled to part of it. So that's a constant advocacy push that's happening, and I was interviewed last week, and so there'll probably be a bit of a rollout, but that's a very strong position that we have there. But that's one example of local government finance. If you insist that we do the step code, fine, where's some funding mechanisms? So this committee is delving into that. It's not about introducing new taxes. It's not about adding more to the taxpayer. That's who we're thinking about. It's just, where can we see revenue go in a different way? So that report will come available in the summer. So the heads up at advocacy days was to let all parties, because we meet with all MLAs, this is the work that we're doing right now. And when this comes about, we want to talk to you about it. Are you receptive to a meeting? Like that sort of is a softer ask. The other one was on climate action. And also, as the province rolls ahead, local government also has a plan in place that's being developed by the UBCM as well. So our intent there is to do outreach with the province. They say they're going to look at 75% of GHG emissions. We're looking at the 25%. And what more can local government do to help the province meet all these goals? We need to work on this together. So new mitigation and adaptation pathways was the third piece that came out. Very productive meetings. So I met, all executive met with Minister Robinson and the Premier. He had to leave. We didn't have him for the full hour because He was in conference calls with other premiers and the prime minister, so okay, I kind of get it. He made time for us though. But, excuse me, I met with the opposition critic, the opposition leader, and 5 other MLAs. So it was really busy in addition to all the other, 3 media interviews and then the committee work and everything that happened at the same time, and then the full board meeting on the Saturday. So very good outcomes. I think all in all, the UBCM executive met with about 40 MLAs, so about half the House in 1.5 days. So we're in groups, we're in and out. And so this is sort of, as you look forward to UBCM this fall, this is a very effective model. We have 20 to 30 minutes with a minister at most, or with an opposition MLA. So for Souk specifically, what will we want to bring to their attention? So these are some things to think about, because UBCM is there. These are here to advocate for everybody for the province, because this is relevant to everybody. So that's great. But meanwhile, what are our issues that are sort of unique to us? One of them is the driving. We've come up before with seniors and the access to driving testing, and the need to have something local, or at least based out of the West Shore at least. That might be something that is following up on. That's not something that really is shared in other places. It's unique to our demographic, right? So it's just, I'm putting it out there to think about, and then we would formulate, it's an effective model, it works, that we could look at as sort of a strategy going into UBCM this fall. And so I'll just sort of leave it just to something to consider as we're going through the work and what's working. There was an announcement today by the province on new legislation affecting permissive tax exemptions. So typically in September, we receive applications from our churches and charity initiatives, Knox Vision Housing and the like. We're a community association where we waive property taxes. The Legion, all sort of non-for-profit charity base. They're now providing us with a tool that would enable some businesses to fall into that. That is not a UBCM position. It's a concern, because how do we make that determination? Why one business and not another one? And when we're hearing of the impact on property taxes, this would then shift more of the tax. Like if we need this much money and we remove this much, but we still need this whole piece, and we say, okay, you guys don't have to pay, then that means everyone else has to pay more to make this whole again. So it's just going to increase taxes on residents. So with most of our tax base coming from residents, it's a concern. So it's just being unveiled. We'll see how that goes, but it automatically raises concern for me in terms of what this would look like. So, and will we have this in place for this budget passing? I don't think so. We kind of need to just, so to me, it's another download, because now our staff, it would be the case of, okay, staff, you need to create all this stuff. Even if a toolkit is provided, it's still more work when we're trying to finish off a budget. And to now have a whole application process run right when we're trying to do our grant application and get more feedback on our budget. Like, where's the funding mechanism to go with this? So there'll be a bit of a pushback on it, which I think you'll see in time. On to other things, though. Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I'll be in St. Hyacinth next week for board meetings, and we'll follow up. We're waiting on the outcome of a grant for our multi-sport lacrosse box. Many other communities are waiting for the outcome of the grant. It's been 18 months. It all went dark because of the federal election. Well, that's kind of old news now. So for us, it's the case of we're trying to plan. We want to know what our next steps are. It's a question I'm going to ask, like, what is going on with this grant? I was with Councillor Lajeunesse with Wounded Warriors. I'm positive good news to share that all of our scouts were found safe and sound. We had a couple of leaders. It sort of felt in my heart that they're scouts, they're prepared. It's part of the motto. They had their kit, their gear. Former military were the leaders. They were well prepared for the conditions, and that's sort of the case. 2 search and rescues members stayed with the 1 leader and the 5 scouts which I think was a comfort to them. And then the other 2 leaders were located this morning, so everyone is fine. They were all well-equipped for the conditions. I'm just glad that everybody was safe. That's very positive. And then, of course, on Saturday, I was at the coldest night, but it was a beautiful evening at the time in Souk, and my team didn't even come close to finishing the walk. But he's 4, right? Like, we gave it a go, and he was not interested. He was interested in the crowd, and then he wasn't at all, and I ended up having to carry him back part of the way, but they're like, why are you back? You guys are fast. I'm like, no, we didn't finish. But it was great to see such a good turnout. The community hall has been secured for next year, and then it's generating more awareness, and so that's great. So that's my report for now, and I'll leave it at that. So, Councillor St. Pierre, it's really hot.
Yes, it is.
Just the coldest night. It goes from like,
Just a quick update on the coldest night of the year.
Yes.
I understood that they increased the amount that was raised by 4,000 just that evening, from around 12 to 16. So that was a really good evening.
yeah, it was a significant jump, so that's awesome. Okay, so that brings us to the end, so I'll call for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Thank you very much, everyone. 8:35. Not bad. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously.